This is Newsroom on SABC News. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg in South Africa. I am Eben Janssen. The show is live and is broadcast to you from our studios in Auckland Park. We're also streaming live on YouTube as we speak, with the whole show then available on our YouTube channel all of the time. Today, we look at the effect of political instability on the African continent. How does this affect the economic outlook for Africa and then furthermore African brands? Homosexual men are now allowed to give blood in South Africa. And we get an update on sentencing procedures in the Griquastad multiple murder case a little bit later. But first, Katrin has our top stories.
Good morning and welcome to the show from my side. I'm Katrin Malan and let's take a look at the news making headlines this morning. Mineral Resources Minister Nkwaku Ramahlori says if parties involved in the now almost 5-month-long platinum strike fail to reach a settlement today, he will pull out of talks, saying he can't continue to meet with the parties indefinitely. He will meet with the 3 major platinum producers, Amplats, Implats, Lonmin, as well as labour union AMCU for the last time today. In Pretoria, Jahendra Naidu, who was the government's chief negotiator in the 1999 arms deal, will testify at the Seriti Commission of Inquiry today. And in international news, 24 people have been killed in a gun battle between Pakistani security forces and militants during a 6-hour siege at an airport in the southern city of Karachi. Taliban gunmen disguised as police guards attacked a terminal at Pakistan's busiest airport on Sunday. Television pictures showed fire raging at the airport as ambulances ferried casualties away. By dawn, the army said the airport had been secured. And then in sport, after a disappointing clay court season that left some doubt about whether he could win again in Paris, Spain's Rafael Nadal rolled to yet another French Open title, becoming the first man to win a major tennis tournament 9 times. The multiple Grand Slam champion won his 9th French Open title in Paris after defeating world number 2 Novak Djokovic in 4 sets. Well, that's the news making headlines. You'll find more on our Facebook page as well. Follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom.
Thanks very much, Katrin. Now, the International Day of Peace was established by a United Nations resolution in 1982 as a global event whose activities are significant in highlighting the worldwide efforts towards conflict resolution and peace building. This event is more relevant to the continent of Africa, where most conflicts are taking place at the moment, with some of those running into decades with limited solutions. Political instability has hit countries like Egypt, Tunisia, Nigeria, Mali, Central African Republic, Kenya, Somalia, Democratic Republic of the Congo now, and many more. To talk about political instability in Africa, we are joined from Pretoria by a researcher at the Institute for Security Studies, Andrew Asamoah. Good morning, Mr. Asamoah. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
Is political instability on the continent a matter of concern for all of us?
Thank you very much. I think it's a matter of concern, both for human lives as well as economic growth, and particularly in marketing Africa outside there, as Africa rising. Because for some time, the whole idea of Africa rising was catching up, and suddenly we've seen quite a number of conflicts that are worrying. So it makes it very difficult to market Africa, as a sustainable economic destination for foreign direct investment. So from every angle, it's a huge, concern to everyone.
The economic outlook for Africa is very good in most countries for the next decade. How does this threaten long-term economic prosperity on the continent?
Now, as I indicated earlier, now no country can survive economically without attracting foreign direct investment. And the fact that the security records of Africa is becoming quite difficult to predict makes it very difficult for investors to throw in their money into any country in Africa. And that is one key difficulty. Looking forward is also a problem because for countries that seems to be doing well, you cannot be sure how sustainable that growth trajectory is going to be sustained. And all of these on the table makes it very difficult for the economic outlook of any country that is, pushing both for development to attract confidence as well as to take along the millions of people who are not necessarily benefiting from the growth that the country might be enjoying.
Now, the African Union has advocated for African solutions or problems, for Africa to have its own solution for African problems. Why do you think we battle so hard in Africa to deal with our own issues?
Well, that's a very important point. I think a number of issues. I feel that from the angle of the threats we are dealing with itself, there's some level of dynamism around the threats we are dealing with, be it conflict, be it terror. They are evolving so fast. And if you look at our rate of framework construction and institution building to respond to these threats, they are rather very slow. So more often than not, before you would have established the right framework to address these issues at the continental level, the threats would have evolved into something else. In the late 80s and early 90s, we were grappling with conflicts within countries. Now it's evolved into something else. We are dealing with religious fundamentalism across the continent and in very many countries that initially were seen to be doing well, like Nigeria. So what happens is that the frameworks that were being constructed to respond to the security threats were conflict heavy. Now the threats have evolved. How do you bring the institutions and the frameworks in line with the changing dynamics of the threats? That is something we continue to grapple with. There are issues of financial difficulties that the country struggles with. But one thing perhaps we need to highlight is the fact that as much as leadership is is something that is lacking in very many African countries, we are also seeing that at the continental level, in the sense that if you take the African Union does well to the level that its member states, rally on board and rally behind a particular agenda. And what is happening is that whenever the African scene lacks a leader to mobilize the rest around him or around that particular country to lead the African Union in a particular direction, the African Union appears not to be doing too well. And so there's a leadership crisis as well, both at the national levels and at the continental level. And all these things play out in different ways, in making it difficult for the African solution to the African problems that our leaders espouse.
You talk about the threat changing now. You specialize in East Africa, where insurgency is a growing threat in those countries. Just give us your views on that and why it's so difficult for East Africa to deal with this insurgency there.
As I indicated, first is the whole issue about the regional response moving at a very slow pace, whilst the threat itself is very dynamic and moving at a very fast pace. If you look at how particularly the Al-Shabaab has evolved in the last couple of years, the group is moving very fast, changing its dynamics. And then we have regional mechanisms that are not necessarily that dynamic because you have to lobby different countries to come on board the agenda to be able to implement them. That is one aspect. But another important thing is that if you look at the trend of religious fundamentalism across Africa right now, I think it's fairly easy for those that are recruiting young people, in the name of jihad or whatever ideology, to get young people because of the rising trend of unemployment and what I will better say are idle hands. Now, if we do not work so fast or so hard to try and empty the ranks of such groups, from gaining additional people to fight, it will be more like pruning a problem rather than dealing with it at the roots. My sense is that going forward, we need strategies that will give young people a lot of issues and a lot of hope to live for, rather than allow, actors that have ulterior motives, giving them ideologies to die for. And that is one battle of winning the hearts and minds of young people, which we really have to up our games across the continent going forward. And issues of peacekeeping and all of that are on the ground, but the non-military approach is also crucial in responding to the crisis we have on our hands at the moment.
Thank you very much for joining us today. That's Senior Researcher at the Institute for Security Studies, Andrew Asamoah. We're talking about political instability in Africa. This week, the Henley Business School in South Africa is hosting a breakfast with one of Africa's foremost global branding and reputation architects, advisors, as well as an author, Thebe Ikalafeng. Recognized and respected across Africa and the world, he's driven the development of more than 100 leading African brands. Now, Thebe joins us in studio this morning, as well as Professor John Foster Pedley, the Dean of the Henley Business School here in South Africa. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.
How are you doing?
I'm sure you heard the interview we just did about political instability, and I'm sure it's something that must hit home, especially for someone like you who've been traveling throughout the continent and working in all these countries. Just tell us how political instability is impacting or threatening the work that you do on the continent.
Well, of course it does, but of course Africa is a much better place than it used to be. If you think about, I think up to 2000 or even so, we had up to 16 raging wars in Africa.
Yeah.
Right now you don't have as many anymore in the continent. It's just sporadic incidents, Mali, Nigeria, Kenya, countries such as that.
Yeah.
But of course, what you need for a thriving Africa, you need an enabling environment, and an enabling environment is a peaceful Africa. I think that's why the African Union has put as their vision for 2063, peace and prosperity.
Peace and prosperity, and that's really the economic outlook for large parts of the continent for the next decade. Isn't that so, Professor?
It certainly is. I mean, we've all got to fight for it, though. I remember, we talk about political instability. I remember in Europe, there was plenty of instability, and we only remember it's 70 years since the D-Day landings, and that's just a lifetime away. So we mustn't get too fussed about the issue of instability and thinking that everything's falling apart. It's a terrible issue, but it's something that we're going to manage and deal with, and it's part of growth as people get more emancipated, they get more intelligent, more educated, and let's not confuse education with intelligence. As they get more educated, then people will necessarily start pushing for new forms of governance, new forms of companies, and life gets more complex. That's just a situation we have to deal with now.
Thebe, you work in the financial heartland of the continent all over, really. Tell us about how brands are developing and how they're tapping into a global market at the moment.
Well, if you look at the Brand Africa 100, which we do at Brand Finance Africa and we do with TNS, we list the top 100 most valuable brands and in Africa. And the one thing that we are noticing is that there's a growth in African brands. While 67% of the brands are still global that Africans admire, a third of them are African. And the countries where those brands are certainly developing are South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya. West Africa leads with 70% of 72% of the brands. But globally, you cannot deny the resurgence or rather the upsurge of MTN, which is the only African brands among the top 100 brands worldwide by many of the surveys which are done. So Africans are building brands, and they're building brands because Africans are becoming wealthy. And as becoming wealthy, they are seeking brands or solutions which are homegrown.
Professor, just tell us about the business breakfast you're having this week, how an esteemed gentleman such as Thebe ties in with this and what you guys are trying to achieve with it.
Well, we're absolutely delighted that Thebe is spending time with us at 7:30 on Wednesday the 11th at Henley Business School up in Sunning Hill. And come for the business breakfast and listen to Thebe talking. I've just come back from the New York Africa Forum in Libreville, where Thebe was. Gave a fantastic talk. There were 7 presidents, Youssou N'Dour, Ekon, and all sorts of other people listening to Thebe talking about Brand Africa, and it's something I wouldn't miss either. I think the work he's doing is outstanding, and I think he's leading us to think differently about brands. And more than anything else, building confidence in ourselves. The Africa we're creating and that Thebe is so deeply part of is something our children will be proud of. And we have to commit to that. So it's really worth spending time listening to this. I'm definitely going to be there.
African brands, how do we compare with international benchmarking at the moment?
We are doing well. We are getting there. If you look at a brand like Safaricom's M-Pesa, which is now the global standard for mobile money transfer. And this was a solution which was created, if you will, for Kenya, for their own particular situations where people could not transfer money from the urban areas to the rural areas. Now, that solution is a global standard that Vodafone now uses worldwide. You know, just the mobile money transfers on M-Pesa are greater than all the mobile transfers worldwide. So we are doing brilliantly as Africans in creating world-class brands, but which are inspired by local insights.
Professor, we as a continent always seem to have, or the historical context sort of shows that we've been at effect when it comes to trends. How do we turn that? How do we become the cause? And in a way, are we starting to set our own trends on the continent?
We most absolutely are starting to set our own trends. And I think one of the most interesting things is when you move into Central, West, East Africa, you start to see the vibe there. It's like New York being reinvented. And South Africa is brilliant, but also we need to get out into those countries and really feel part of what's happening. Africans are initiating things. You know, we're starting to see Africans coming back. The diaspora Africans coming back. They've been employed because they are so talented and so capable, and they're coming back to bring new ideas into Africa, and also finding that homegrown African ideas are world-leading. We have to have confidence.
And we are also inspiring our global brands. If you look at Louis Vuitton, for example, I was quite fascinated to see they launched blankets which are almost inspired by the Sesotho Seana Marena blankets. Now, that's an African standard which has now been used globally. And if you look at those big plastic black bags which were inspired by the Nigerians when they kicked out the Ghanaians in the 80s, and they said Ghana must go. And those bags, which many of us look down on, are now Louis Vuitton put a Louis Vuitton stamp on them. And now Africans themselves are saying, my goodness, we have set with the solutions right here at home. So not only are we competing, but we are also inspiring global brands to learn from Africa and to take African solutions and take them worldwide.
Professor, now South Africa, our economic outlook has stagnated a little bit, to be nice. With the outlook for Africa looking so good, what do we have to do as brands and entrepreneurs here in South Africa to tap into this African century that we're about to go into?
Well, I mentioned don't confuse education with intelligence. Because the history of South Africa, a lot of people didn't get the appropriate education. What we do have is tremendous intelligence. What we're seeing at Henry Business School now, when people do the MBA, it's an international MBA. They're doing as well as anywhere in the world. There is no shortcut to skills. Skills require discipline, they require application, and they require the sense of deferred gratification. You're building up your future for your children as well as yourself. So what it takes for us to do is dedicate ourselves with confidence that we can get the skills we need to be globally competitive. I'm absolutely sure we can do that, but it requires determination, dedication, and following people like Tebe, who is leading the way in this.
On that personal note, Tebe, you've been named one of the 100 most influential Africans alive today by New African magazine. Great power comes with great responsibility, doesn't it?
Well, it did. Well, I think every single one of us play our part by contributing our talents. Because I think if you don't use your talent in the right place, you are not cheating yourself, but you're also cheating your country and your continent. And our continent requires us to be there, because our continent, which is growing at over 5%, and has been like that since 2000, is a continent where all the great opportunities are coming from. Our continent, which is growing, where the high net worth individuals are growing at 9.9%, which is number 2 only to the US, is where everybody needs to be. And for us to succeed, I just want to add on to what John said from an education and intelligence perspective, is we need to focus on entrepreneurs. We need to grow young entrepreneurs. If you look at Africa, the continent, and perhaps Africa as well, 70% of the population is under the age of 30. And those people have got raw ideas, they have got the raw energy. It needs to be bottled into entrepreneurial opportunities. We need to create an enabling environment for Africa to thrive.
Ministry of Small Business has been created in South Africa to deal exactly with that by President Jacob Zuma and his new cabinet. What I want to ask you is the monopolies that's stymieing the growth of these small business, not just in South Africa, but throughout the continent. We have quite a few monopolies that's stifling small business and in a way makes it almost expensive to to do day-to-day business. How do we deal with that, Professor?
Well, you've made a very good point. In 1994, I remember reading a NEDLAC report done by the Monitor Group. It said 7 families managed South Africa. There were companies that had 98% monopoly or 90% oligopolies.
Yeah.
Any form of oligopoly or monopoly destroys small business, as does corruption, because we have to take this on the nose. Any form of corruption steals from the talented people who are going to get somewhere on the basis of their own talent. We have to manage this, and we have to build confidence. There is no shortcut to it, but I think it's a great idea to have the Ministry of Small Business. But it's also equally great for corporates and government to be supporting small business in every way and teach your children to run businesses from early on.
Tebe, you got the last word. What's the message to the young entrepreneurs, young designers, young people out there that want to make this the African century?
You should not depend on the government to help you. You should not depend on your parents to help you. You should depend on yourself. If you look at some of the greatest entrepreneurs who are in the world, or even in Africa themselves, from the Dangotes to the Herman Mashabas in South Africa, all those people are self-made. They did not say that the world owed them something. They said, I could give the world something. Well,
gentlemen, thank you very much. That's Tebe Ikalafeng, who is, Africa's foremost global branding and reputation architect. That's a mouthful. Thank you for joining us. And then
thank you for
Professor John Foster Pedley is the Dean of the Henley Business School here in South Africa. Thank you for joining us and giving us your sober thoughts this morning.
Thank you so much, Ivan.
Now let's take a look at some of the front pages around the world this morning. Of course, it's Monday morning, so lots have been going on in Europe. Beautiful pictures of Spain's Rafael Nadal after he won his ninth French Open title this weekend. In the UK, on the front page of The Independent, focus shifts to the FIFA World Cup as pressure is mounting on FIFA after more major sponsors signalled growing unease over corruption allegations surrounding the award of the 2022 World Cup just days before the tournament kicks off in Brazil this year. Then in the US, a truck driver has been charged over a road crash that killed one man and critically injured comedian and 30 Rock actor Tracy Morgan, who remains in a critical condition. Now it's time for your thoughts on social media, of course. At SABC Newsroom on Twitter is where you can interact with us. We love your contributions. We especially love the pictures that you sent in to us. But let's take a look at what you are saying on this Monday morning. Seatless says, okay, it's arms deal. Of course, that's in the news. Inquiry is a waste of time and money. No one will be charged at the end. Joe Medici is dead and others kept their hands clean. That's your opinion. Seatless Dilo says, just shaking my head in dismay. Hashtag arms deal. Train Solange says, media suddenly has interest in arms deal because they hope casuals will rat on his homies. And there you have a picture incoming from the SABC Commission. That was tweeted by our very own reporter, Njanji Chauke. Of course, we had him last week. A hearing adjourns until Monday. That's today, with testimony from Jahendra Naidu and, of course, Ronnie Caswells, who you see in the picture there in the back left corner, to continue today and tomorrow. We're going to take a short commercial break. Newsroom will be back right after this.
You ask? This is who we are.
We are technologically driven.
We are unashamedly Afrocentric.
We advise you not only on legal matters,
but on health issues as well.
We bring imagination to life.
We celebrate arts and culture and lifestyle.
We tackle life challenges head on.
We dig deep. We probe. We question.
We invite you to take a view from our house,
as we tell it without fear, separating fiction from factual.
We are the SABC News Channel.
All news, all global, all the time.
SABC News celebrates Africa.
Welcome back. This is Newsroom on SABC News. Jayendra Naidu, the government's chief negotiator in the arms deal, will testify at the Sariti Commission of Inquiry in Pretoria today. Former Deputy Defence Minister Ronnie Kasrils, who testified at the Commission on Friday, will be back this morning. Also in the dock will be former Defence Minister Masiwa Lekota. Now, SABC reporter Njanje Chake joins us from Sammy Marks Park Conference Centre, where the Sariti Commission is sitting. Good morning, Janji. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Evan.
Just give us a quick update. What can we expect from today? Will Jay Naidu, will he give evidence?
Yes, welcome to the Arms Commission here in Pretoria. Evan, just to clarify, actually the person that is going to take the stand today is Jayendra Naidu, and I think it's important that viewers out there, they don't confuse him with the former minister, Jay Naidu. Jayendra Naidu, who was he in the whole arms deal picture? Jayendra Naidu was sort of the middleman between the South African government and the various arms suppliers as well as the financing companies. He will be taking the stand this morning to tell us a bit more as to what type of decisions were taken when those contracts were negotiated. You know, there is controversy regarding how the arms deal was put together, because it was totally unheard of in the history of the military in South Africa, because previously arms contracts were negotiated by Armscor, but with the so-called strategic defense procurement packages, we saw government taking sort of a lead, and they appointed Jayendra Naidu to be the chief negotiator. He was representing the then Deputy President Thabo Mbeki. And if I can just, for the sake of members of the public, just to go through some of the highlights of his statement, he will be talking a bit more about the delivery of armaments which were satisfactory in their military specifications and performance. And he will also talk about the growth of the South African arms industry and maintain South Africa's strategic capability in the key sector. And he will also look at the economic benefits of entering into that arms deal. You'll know that there is controversy with regards to the offset programs. Many people are asking whether this arms deal did create those jobs that were projected in what we now know as the DIPS and NIPS, the defense participation programs, as well as other job creation projects that were projected.
Janji, just before we go on, big raps were put on the testimony of Ronnie Kasrils, who was the Deputy Minister of Defence in this case last week. Are people disappointed with what he's come up with in front of the Commission?
People were expecting damning evidence, especially if you look at the line that Ronnie Kasrils has taken in the past few months, especially with the elections. But we saw Ronnie Kasrils towing that official line and abrogating responsibility, saying that he was a mere deputy minister. As a deputy minister, he's not a member of cabinet, and he was not involved in terms of taking executive decisions. He did also testify that although he was very close to the late former defense minister Joe Modise, he was not privy to sort of the matters that he handled in terms of those arms procurement packages. You will recall that a few months ago, some of the former Armscor employees did make some damning allegations regarding kickbacks and bribes that were taken. You'll remember the Tony Yengeni story. Some people got Mercedes-Benz at very reduced costs. When Jayendra Naidu come to the stand today, we expect some of those arms deal critics, people like Terry Crawford Brown and others, to sort of grill him during the cross-examination process. Yeah, Ben.
And then, Judge, finally, just are you expecting a heavy week with a lot of big guns coming through the turnstiles there at the Sariti Commission?
Yes, indeed, Eben. I mean, last week we saw Ronnie Kasrils coming through on Friday. Due to time constraints, they couldn't finish cross-examining him. He'll be returning tomorrow morning. He's been allocated 2 to 3 more hours of cross-examination, and shortly after we'll be seeing the former Defense Minister Musiwa Lekota taking the stand tomorrow on Tuesday, and thereafter we're likely to see people like the former Finance Minister Trevor Manuel also taking the stand, and finally the former President Thabo Mbeki, who's going through that period of grieving the passing of his mother at the moment. So it's going to be a very interesting week indeed as those big guns come through. And we've also seen some of the top lawyers coming through to represent these former government officials or ministers. We've seen some of the top lawyers like Advocate Marumo Morani, who has come through here to represent those former government ministers. But organizations like Lawyers for Human Rights, people like Terry Crawford Brown, they're really sticking to their guns in terms of getting information and trying to get to the bottom of this matter relating to the arms deal. We know that it is going to cost the South African taxpayer more than 70 billion rand. So people really want answers.
Janji, thank you very much. And Janji Chalke, not breaking chairs in studio today, but at the Arms Deal Commission in Pretoria, where, of course, Jayendra Naidu, just to recap, Jayendra Naidu, who was the government's chief negotiator in the 1999 arms deal, he will testify at the Seriti Commission of Inquiry in Pretoria today. Naidu, who represented then Deputy President Thabo Mbeki in, international office negotiating team, will shed more light on how contracts were negotiated with various arms suppliers and financiers. Former Deputy Minister Ronnie Caswells, who testified at the Commission on Friday, will continue submitting his evidence tomorrow. Former Defence Minister Musiwa Lekota will also testify at the Commission tomorrow. President Jacob Zuma appointed the Commission in 2011 to investigate alleged corruption in the multi-billion rand arms deal here in South Africa. Well, what are you talking about on social media? Let's have a look. Congratulations to the Pakistan Army and Rangers on successful operation against terrorists at Karachi airport. Of course, there was the shootings overnight. We'll keep you updated how that story breaks. Cedra Hassan says, stop condemning it. We don't need your condemnation at all. Of course, Karachi airport attack is what you guys are talking about. Muhammad Salman says, ethically, Prime Minister of Pakistan should resign from his post as he's badly failed to secure the country, Karachi airport. That's a bit of a stretch. Nadia Anwar says, I salute Pakistan Army for sacrificing their lives for us. Of course, there you have a picture of what's been happening on at Karachi airport as we're fighting overnight there, and another couple of, as you see, the terminal building on fire. Ethnic Uzbeks in group that attacked Pakistan's Karachi airport. Paramilitary, well, that's paramilitary action ongoing at Karachi airport. They did say this morning that, well, they have secured the airport. That's the Pakistan Armed Forces. Let's take a look at what's on our Facebook page. Of course, our Facebook page is very busy there. You can read more about world number one Rafael Nadal, who won his record extending 9th French Open title last night. On the page, you can also see that the ANC has questioned whether the platinum strike in the Northwest is indeed a collective bargaining strike and not political in nature, and that President Jacob Zuma has been discharged from hospital after undergoing routine medical tests. All those stories and more on our Facebook page. The World Cup kicks off this week, and while 32 football squads from around the world gather in Brazil for it will be another extravaganza of sporting excellence, let's take a look at the 2010 final that took place at the FNB Stadium here in Johannesburg, where Spain walked away as the world champs.
On the 11th of July 2010, Spain and the Netherlands contested football's ultimate prize in Johannesburg, South Africa. In extra time, Andres Iniesta's goal brought joy to a nation which had suffered badly in the economic downturn. Since their victory, the Spanish have retained the European Championship and head to Brazil as the world's #1 ranked team.
It was the best of times, 2010 year in South Africa. Well, you wouldn't believe 4 years have gone by in a flash. And on Thursday, the world gathers in Brazil for, well, the showpiece of the beautiful game. Don't go away. Newsroom will be back after this.
SABC, sharing 20 years of inspiration.
United States President Barack Obama has expressed sadness over the shooting at a U.S. Army base in Fort Hood in Texas. A soldier opened fire on fellow service members at the military base, killing 3 people and wounding 16 others before committing suicide at the same post.
I want to just assure all of us that we are going to get to the bottom of exactly what happened. Any shooting is troubling. Obviously, this reopens the pain of what happened at Fort Hood 5 years ago.
We urge you to stay with us here on AM News on Channel 404 on DSTV with myself, Elvis Preston.
And me, Kendo Makamati.
We'll be back at the top of the hour, so do not touch that remote.
That's AM News, daily at 10 a.m. on SABC News.
Zoom into Africa. This is Seychelles. The president is Mr. James Michel James. Seychelles got independent from United Kingdom on 29 June in 1976. The population is over 80,000 people. One of the major languages spoken is English. Monetary unit is the Seychelles rupee.
SABC, sharing 20 years of inspiration.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. I'm Katrien Malan, here to bring you the top stories of this morning. Mineral Resources Minister Nwaku Ramaglori says if parties involved in the now almost 5-month-long platinum strike fail to reach a settlement today, he will pull out of talks, saying he can't continue to meet with the parties indefinitely. He will meet with the 3 major platinum producers, Amplats, Implats, Lonmin, as well as labour union AMPU for the last time today. In Pretoria, Jahendra Naidu, who was the government's chief negotiator in the 1999 arms deal, will testify at the Suriti Commission of Inquiry today. In international news, 24 people have been killed in a gun battle between Pakistani security forces and militants during a 6-hour siege at an airport in the southern city of Karachi. Taliban gunmen disguised as police guards attacked a terminal at Pakistan's busiest airport on Sunday. Television pictures showed fire raging at the airport as ambulances ferried casualties away. By dawn, the army said the airport had been secured. Then in sport, after a disappointing clay court season that left some doubt about whether he could win again in Paris, Spain's Rafael Nadal rolled to yet another French Open title, becoming the first man to win a major tennis tournament 9 times. The multiple Grand Slam champion won his 9th French Open title in Paris after defeating world number 2 Novak Djokovic in 4 sets. That's your top stories this morning. Be aware that they are available on our Facebook page. Also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Yeben, back to you.
Thank you very much, Katrien. This year will be the first time during National Blood Donation Month since 2006 that homosexual men in South Africa can donate blood without having been celibate for 6 months or longer. In the past, gay men were seen as being high risk of being infected with HIV. But with the ban now lifted, there will no longer be any policy that favours one donor over another. To talk to us about this new development and about National Blood Donation Month, we are joined by the South African National Blood Bank spokesperson, Vanessa Raju. Vanessa, good morning.
Good morning, Evan.
Let's start with the ban before we go on to Blood Donation Month. Why was the policy then made when heterosexual people could engage in equally risky behaviour, as it were? It was a little bit un-PC, wasn't it?
Well, I think first there must be clarity. It was more a criteria. We would accept blood from celibate gay men, so it wasn't a ban on gay people.
Yeah.
And when the South African National Blood Service formed about 13 years ago, we benchmarked with statistics that the WHO had in place. It was a level that we had to stick by to ensure that we have safe blood in our country. Obviously, to collect data in South Africa, it takes time, And we've worked closely with the Department of Health. Prior to 2006, it was a 5-year ban on men who had sex with men.
Yeah.
We changed that when we implemented new testing procedures, and that was changed to 6 months. And again, it takes time with working with local data. And now we're at a stage where we can lift that 6-month ban and say, well, anyone, irrespective of whether you're heterosexual or homosexual, you will be deferred for a period of 6 months if you're in a new relationship or you've had multiple sexual partners.
But just explain to us, how does the blood bank ensure that me, a member of the public, gets blood that is safe for use?
Well, it's our criteria. When you come through, we have a questionnaire. It's to assess your health as well as your lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And the questions are quite intense. It asks very detailed questions about your sexual life and your extra activities, perhaps drug interaction or medication you might be on. And all of that helps us assess whether or not you're a safe candidate. And then, of course, our testing facilities are state-of-the-art. We test for hepatitis B and C, syphilis and HIV. And we're one of the few countries that individually check every single donation.
Now, South Africa, we always seem to be the short end of the stick when it comes to donating blood. Why are South Africans not donating enough blood?
I think it's an international problem. The more countries move into a space of voluntary non-remuneration, which is what the WHO has put in place for all countries to reach by 2020, it's a case of people having to give unselfishly. You do it for the sake of helping someone else, to help save a life, and it asks a lot of you. It asks of your time, it asks of your blood, and all it really is a reward to know that you might save someone else's life and nothing else for you to gain. And I guess that's sometimes a deterrent because people expect something, but we have we've got 432,000 donors in our donor base who are part of this community, who wants to make a difference to others.
Now, it's Blood Donation Month. Tell us about your work, what you guys are doing, and then what's the message to South Africans in general about this?
Well, June 14th is an internationally recognized day. It's World Blood Donor Day. But we've adopted the whole month of South Africa. It's our way of saying thank you to all our donors who participate throughout the year. For those who want to get involved, to come through and find out more about blood donation. We've got various blood grouping donor drives happening throughout the month. And if people want to engage with our staff, find out more about blood donation, you come through at any of our 87 donor centres or visit us at a blood drive that we might be based at a shopping mall. And there's information on our website, which is www.sanbs.org.za.
Well, Vanessa, thank you very much for joining us. I hope that South Africans, that you go out and donate blood. We always seem to be just days away from running completely empty. Thank you once again for joining us, Vanessa. Now, we move on. Pre-sentencing procedures will continue in the Northern Cape High Court in Kimberley in the case of a 17-year-old minor who's been found guilty of killing 3 members of the Steenkamp family. Dion Steenkamp, his wife Christel, and their 14-year-old daughter Martella were shot dead on their farm, Nohoek, near Griquastad, in April 2012. The convicted youth was also found guilty of raping Martella and defeating the ends of justice. Ulrich Hendricks from Kimberley gives us an update of the trial. Good morning, Ulrich.
Hi, good morning, Evan. Well, last week was actually a week where mostly experts were testifying in aggravation and mitigation of sentencing of the 17-year-old boy. We had Ian Sonnekes, Dr. Ian Sonnekes. He is a juvenile criminologist. He had several interactions with the boy, also spoke to the family of the teenager and, girlfriends that he used to have in the past, etc. Interesting thing, why he was testifying for the defense in this case, and the very first words that he actually told the court was because of the gravity of these murders, the gravity of the crimes, that he doesn't see that the boy does not get some sort of long-term imprisonment. He also spoke about how the boy was a gentleman towards the young ladies who he interacted with or dated with. Interesting enough, shortly after that, when it was the state's turn, to basically take him under cross-examination. Hannes Klute, the prosecutor, read out several SMSs that the young boy sent to some of his girlfriends, where he actually used quite foul and crude language in his communication with those girls. The second expert witness that we saw was a psychiatrist. She was first saw the boy about a year ago when his then defense team asked her to look at if he was fit to stand trial. She spoke to him several times, found that he was fit to stand trial. She shortly after he was incarcerated and found guilty, spoke to him again. She told the court that basically he doesn't have psychopathic tendencies at the moment, but said that he will have to be looked after quite. Because there seems to be an opinion with that somewhere in the future there might be some psychopathic tendencies coming out. And then we also had a police psychologist who testified. This was Major Bronwyn Stollers. She also looked at the boy, and she basically said that he is posing a risk to society. The gravity of the murders, again, the viciousness of the text coming through, and she also said that long-term imprisonment will probably be the best option in this. You'll recall that the 17-year-old boy was 15 years and 8 months when the murders and the rape were committed. So he has to be sentenced under Children's Justice Act. Even if he turns 18 tomorrow, he still needs to be sentenced in accordance with the child. So the court needs to look at various options that includes rehabilitation, possible, or long-term imprisonment, depending on how the gravity of the crimes. We also had the guardian of the child. She also testified, saying that she still thinks that is not guilty, and until the day that the boy actually tells her that he is guilty of this murder, she will believe in his innocence. And we also had the grandmother of Martella and the mother of Dion and Christelle, who also testified that it's been quite a hectic 2 years for the family, and they are trying to go through this. Interesting, every witness that was called last week asked that the boy be sent for psychiatric evaluation throughout the next couple of years. The case has been postponed until the 24th of June. The state and then the defense will then look at, will put in their heads of arguments whether or not they want him to go for long-term punishment, incarceration, or looking at other ways that he can be sentenced.
Thank you very much, Ulrich. That's a comprehensive wrap from Kimberley, of course, in the Northern Cape High Court. The case of a 17-year-old minor has been found guilty of killing 3 members of the Steenkamp family. Caused quite a stir, polarized the community. People are either supporting the young man or completely against him. It's a real landmark case here in South Africa. Let's take a final look at what you are passionate about on social media this morning. Ando says, it's unbelievable that Nadal has won 9 French Open titles. To stay at the top for so long must require incredible dedication. Humble guy too. Wazim says, Nadal, you beauty. Thanks, Rafa, for all the emotions you gave and for your phenomenal game. I'm so happy. Rafa and Nadal, there you have a marvelous picture right at the backcourt there of Roland Garros. That's after double fought by Novak Djokovic. I watched it live. Saw Rafael Nadal claim his 14th Grand Slam title and his 9th at Roland Garros. I'm sure it is a record that very, very few people will ever get close to. There you have a picture of a tearful Rafael Nadal with the trophy on, court Philippe Chatrier in Paris, where he won a record 9th title. Newsroom is broadcast live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, between 9 and 10 a.m. every weekday morning. The show repeats at 2 in the afternoon with a rebroadcast at 5 a.m. the following morning. We're also live on YouTube at that time, with our whole show available on demand on our YouTube channel all of the time. This is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom. We love it in the morning.